Welcome back to Bottles and Bottles, the uncut, unfiltered, unprepared podcast where we talk a little bit about whiskey and a lot about the journeys of becoming a first-time dad, although today we are just talking about whiskey. Mm-hmm. I'm joined here with the OGs, Adam and Bill. Welcome back to the Thunderdome.
What's going on, guys?
Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's a good day. It's a beautiful day.
You got some good
outside.
energy today. Did you get sun last week?
I was in Hilton Head last week, as you can tell from my shirt.
Salty Dog Cafe.
The Salty D. I like this shirt. It's super comfy. And my wife kind of made me buy it. She's like, "You're here. You got to buy a shirt." Yeah. So
I think that's necessary.
I think it's a rule.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I did because it's a cool color too. It's like a maroon color. It's got a little yellow label on it. It's nice. If you're gonna go to Hilton Head, you got to buy a Salty Dog Cafe shirt.
Yeah. Well, you're looking good. I see Bill's cracking a smile over there as usual.
Bill's always got a weird little.
You're always
smiling.
happy, man.
Always smiling. Yeah. What's not to be happy about?
I know. No, I love it. It's great. You guys are good.
Cool. Good deal. So, like I said, today is going to be a whiskey only episode. For those of you who are not interested in whiskey, I still encourage you to listen. No, I mean, look, we do bottles and bottles. We do babies and whiskey, right? But we talk a lot about whiskey. We talk about what we're drinking at the time. And I think it's only fitting that we can actually go over each bottle and say, what does this label mean? So maybe a viewer is out there and they want to know why would we like that type of whiskey? Mm-hmm. Maybe it's something I would like. Mm-hmm. And then you can kind of go, oh, well, I like that whiskey and it has a similar mash bill. Well, maybe they don't even know what a mash bill is. So we'll dig into that a little bit today. Let's uncork it with Bill, who is the guest of our whiskey today. What did you bring for us?
I brought us a single barrel strength Four Roses, a OBSO recipe.
We got the bottle back here.
Yeah, we have the bottle back here. Comes in at 112 proof. It's like I said, their OBSO recipe, which is a high rye recipe.
Is that what OBSO means?
OBSO is one of their 10 recipes.
Okay.
It's their O as in the high rye. Sorry, the B is the high rye. The O represents one of their 5 yeast strains that they use.
So OBSO, the letter stands for the barrel for which they pulled it from, and collectively that's what it is.
So this is a special pick from the Ohio liquor department.
Okay.
They selected this barrel themselves. The B, the second letter,
I can see it here,
represents their mash bill. So there's an OB and an OE. The B represents their higher rye mash bill.
Okay.
And then the last letter, there's 5 different yeast strains. That O represents their dark, deep fruit yeast strain.
Okay.
That's a lot to take in.
It's
I want to cover that high rye.
It's a complicated. Yeah. I think maybe the Four Roses could have its own segment at some point.
Yeah. I think we'll dig into more. Let's start.
It's a different monster.
That's a beautiful bottle, though.
It is.
When I initially saw it, when you sent me a photo, I thought that bottle was much larger. I'm surprised. That's a 750 milliliter, right?
Yeah.
It's deceiving.
It is deceiving because I know that the Angel's Envy we had on last episode
is taller.
It's taller, it's wider, but it's very thin front to back. Where this is just, it's
more robust. When you did send the picture, I was like, that's a missile. he's carrying a liquid-filled missile right now. So at any rate, that's a lot of terminology. We probably won't dig into a lot of that stuff today. Let's start off with the basics. What is whiskey? And I pulled up I don't know where.
It's an alcohol to start.
Well, yeah, it's an alcohol. So
got that one right.
Whiskey is a distilled spirit made out of fermented grain, most often rye, wheat, corn, or barley. So that's kind of where, when you think of what's in a recipe, and for those listeners out there, when you hear the term mash bill, in my mind, that's a fancy word for recipe. Mm-hmm. What's it made of?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah.
We just
your ingredient list.
Yeah. But the mash bill is like what's actually blended before it goes through the distillation process.
What percent of corn? What percent of wheat? What percent of grain?
Correct. Which brings me to my next point, and that is there's a pretty big misconception on whiskey. I was at a restaurant recently, and I said, "Hey, can you send me a whiskey list?" And she goes, "Well, do you want whiskey or do you want bourbon?" I wanted to go on a tangent, because bourbon is a type of whiskey. So when you think of whiskey, think of the term vehicle. Whiskey is a vehicle, and you kind of work down a flow chart. It's like, okay, I want a vehicle. What kind of vehicle do I want? I want a truck. I want a sedan. I want a coupe, that kind of thing. That to me represents what type of whiskey is it.
Yeah, good comparison.
Is it a bourbon, a Scotch, an Irish whiskey, a rye whiskey, those kinds of things. So you kind of work your way down the list, and then it's like, okay, you said you want a bourbon. So we know it's a whiskey. The type of whiskey you want is a bourbon. What kind of bourbon you want? Now we're getting into the brand names, like a Ford or a Chevy or a GMC.
I would make a slight argument there because bourbon, you're 100% American made.
Sure.
So that puts you in a bit of a different quality.
But it's still a type of bourbon.
I read you. So continue.
Or
So you've got
it's
your
a type of whiskey.
you've got your brands that
Yeah.
are, varying widely.
Yeah.
But also it's kind of interesting that you've got distilleries like Buffalo Trace that have a lot of sub brands,
Sure.
right?
Well, it's, same
Much
thing as
like
a car.
a Ford, right?
Same thing. I was just going to say that look at Ford.
Yeah.
Even if you go in and say, let's say I go in and say, hey, I want a whiskey and I want it to be a bourbon. And okay, well, what kind do you want? Same thing if I walk into a dealership and I say, okay, I want a truck and I want it to be a Ford.
Yep.
Well, what kind of Ford do you want?
Right.
Maybe it's the new electric Ford. Maybe it's a Ford F-150. Maybe
Sick
it's
truck, by the way.
maybe it's a Ford this or that. And what kind of bells and whistles do you want? So the point here is to understand that whiskey is a general term for there's Irish whiskey, Scotch whiskey, Japanese whiskey, which I don't know much about, Canadian whiskey, bourbon whiskey, Tennessee whiskey, rye whiskey, and blended whiskey. So when you think of all these terms, I understand why people get confused. If I go in and ask for a whiskey and they go, oh, you don't want whiskey, you want a bourbon. Well, okay.
Depends on the day.
Yeah.
Maybe I do want whiskey.
So that's kind of the first step as our introduction to whiskey and what actually is whiskey. Now, we drink a lot of bourbon. So let's dig into a little bit about what makes a bourbon bourbon. Do you guys know? What would you say the number one most important thing is?
Corn. It needs at least 51% corn, 50% corn.
I think I'm going to go back to my
51.
same argument. It's American. It's everything sourced here. You've got your barrels, American oak. It's produced in the United States. I think that is what makes a bourbon bourbon.
So it has to be 51% corn. The mash bill, aka the recipe.
But you guys would say that's the first thing.
I think so.
Yeah.
American, I can say that. Yeah.
Yeah. I do. So it has to be 51% corn. Yes, you're right. USA made. It must be distilled to no more than 160 proof, which is 80% ABV, which stands for alcohol by volume. And we're going to talk about the bottle that you brought. We're going to go through the label in a little bit here, but 160 proof.
That's pretty high.
Yeah, and that's pre-barreled. That's distilled to 160, so that's
correct
before it enters the barrel.
Right.
Correct, which it's going to come out less than that. Must be aged in new charred oak barrels. That's a big one too. Must be aged in new charred
How
oak
would
barrels.
you say new?
Brand new.
Yeah, so
You cut down a tree, they make a barrel.
They haven't
guess-
aged anything else. They haven't.
Well, then how does that finishing go? Oh, does that then? We had that on the last
They're
one.
aged
Angel's
first,
Envy.
and then they're
Got it.
finished.
I read you. Thank you.
You got
Yeah,
it.
so it's got to be aged in these brand new charred oak barrels, which I watched a YouTube video where they actually it shows them cutting down the trees, the oak trees, and then they make the barrel out of that wood, and then they literally put it on an assembly line, and there's a flame. As the barrels run through this assembly line, they just fire it and char the whole inside of that barrel.
That's awesome.
That's where a lot of the flavors come from, which is pretty cool. So that's obviously a big one.
Here's a question.
Yeah.
Do they have to use something specific to char it? How is the flame made? Is it propane? Is it?
I don't think there's any,
Doesn't
and I
matter.
don't think there's any specifications or requirements on that, to my knowledge.
Fire.
Fire's fire.
I mean, I'm
Okay,
reading
definitely.
straight from the what's the liquor agency website? I took a screenshot of it.
OHLQ,
Well, that's the Ohio one.
Surgeon General.
It's like the alcohol and tobacco, whatever they call that.
Federal
Yeah.
level.
Right. So those are some of the biggest requirements. It has to be aged for a minimum of 2 years. So it has to, once they take that clear liquid, because some
goes
people don't
in
know
clear.
it's clear. When
Yeah.
you put it into a barrel, it's actually clear.
Bill's got a couple of things he might be able to show us.
Yeah. Do you want to
I can-
pull
You
one
want
of
to pull
those
those?
out?
Yeah,
can bring it-
I think that'd be a good point.
I
to pull
can-
those in.
I can bring out a white dog.
So
Yeah.
so we have this bottle for those of us on YouTube. Check out this bottle. This is called White Dog. This is before it goes into any barrels.
So this is from Buffalo Trace Distillery.
Yes.
And it's their branded White Dog, right?
Yeah, it's their branded white
Yeah.
dog. It's their mash bill number 1, which constitutes many of their products.
So before it goes into the barrel, it looks like that, right? Then it's got to be aged for a minimum of 2 years in a new charred oak barrel. And we're talking bourbon again, so it's got to be 51% corn. And
Which this would qualify.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
So
and that's what's in there. That's the mash bill.
corn,
That's the
rye,
recipe.
malted barley recipe, 62.5% alcohol by volume, 125 proof.
Yikes.
Wow.
Yikes. I'm not cutting the grass that day.
Especially drinking this.
Hey, we had a 28
has anyone
with Stag, though.
had something like this?
I've never had white dog.
Okay, so I've had the product from Jack Daniels.
Okay.
Their rye, whatever would be the equivalent White Dog, hot. Very, very potent. Obviously, it's a higher proof, and it's what goes into the barrels before, and it is a unique experience.
Okay. Cool. So again, we're going to take this clear liquid that we have sitting in front of us that has that particular mash bill, and we're going to age it for at least 2 years. Now, another requirement of bourbon, any whiskey or any bourbon, I should say, aged for a period less than 4 years. So it's sitting in a barrel for less than 4 years. It must be labeled with that duration that it was sitting in that aging barrel. So you will see a 2-year bourbon.
Okay.
They have to say
have
that.
to
That
tell
is
you
a
if it's
legal
less than
thing.
4 years.
But if it's less than 4,
If it's less than 4,
only if it's less than 4.
only if it's less than 4. Anything over 4 years, if
They
they
don't
want
have to
to, if they're
state.
going to put an age statement on there, it's going to be the youngest batch that's going into that barrel.
Okay, so you're telling me if there's no age statement on it, it was aged at least 4 years.
Correct. There's no age statement. It was aged at least 4 years. If there is an age statement on it, that is the youngest. What word am I looking for here?
Youngest of-
barrel they took, batch they use. So say they blended in a small batch per se, a 19 year barrel,
Yeah.
a 15-year barrel, and a 12-year barrel. They could age it. They could put a statement on there for 12 years.
Correct.
But they're pulling those in to try and keep a consistency of the
Yeah.
flavor
Correct.
over the time.
So you could buy a 12-year bourbon, but little do you know, you're actually drinking something that maybe was aged for 19 years.
a percentage of that
Sure.
spirit.
If they mix it, yeah,
Right,
to
right.
get that flavor profile the way they want it, because they will
Right.
take different barrels and actually mix them together after the aging process to get that particular flavor profile that they're looking for.
And this flavor profile rests on the shoulders of how many people, do you know?
Out the master distiller,
Not many.
not many.
there's-
I would assume there's
You
one.
you
There's
figure it's
one
like a
final
small group, or
there's-
is it?
No,
I would
it's
say 1 or 2 people. That
Oh,
yeah.
really?
they're the master distiller, or
Like
Yeah,
what
where's-
I'm curious on. I can't remember where I heard it, but I feel like Pappy goes through a group of people.
that goes through the Van Winkle family.
Okay.
That's a different scenario. But most places, yeah, like there's a documentary on Hulu. I don't know if we've mentioned it before, but it's
Some whiskey. It's just whiskey, right?
called Neat.
Okay.
So it's a really
Yeah.
cool documentary, but they go to different distilleries and you kind of get to see the process behind what they're doing. But yeah, like for example, when they're at the Buffalo Trace distillery, there's more than one guy, but they only talk to one guy. And he's like, I'm the guy. I'm the one that decides what
Right.
needs to go where. Obviously maybe they have input from other places, but yeah, it's a very select group of people who are deciding what that particular whiskey needs. How we need a little bit of that 19 year in this particular barrel
Mm-hmm.
that we're going to put out in this bottle to match the profile that they're looking for. So
You know, sometimes I sit here and I'm still just so intrigued that this is the level. I mean, obviously they're great products, but there's a lot of thought that goes into some of these spirits.
yeah, it's crazy.
And it's what I appreciate about whiskey and some of
Yeah.
these different, even outside of that. I know there's so much heritage.
Yeah, and
in
they've been
whiskey.
doing it for a long time, right? It's not just
hundreds of years.
it's not just
right.
it's not something they just started doing.
Well,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Okay. So again, we kind of talked about this. The last spec on there is that it's got to be in the U.S. and not Kentucky. A lot of people think bourbon has to come from Kentucky.
You know, whoever I told this to, I got to apologize because I feel like I have just said that to so many people and I had the misconception.
Yeah.
So as a blanket, like, I'm sorry for giving wrong information.
Well,
I was not aware.
and that's kind of the way it started. We talked about this on a previous episode. Yeah, maybe it started there, it became popular there because of the particular flavor profile that they had from that Kentucky limestone that they have down
Right.
there. It creates something a little bit different that not a lot of other places are able to replicate. But
Why did a lot of distilleries settle there? You have the bourbon trails that are in Kentucky.
because of that, because of
Just
that,
the resources that
water.
were nearby,
Yeah,
the
the-
oak, the water, the limestone.
the natural resources, it's
Yeah.
a great place. And you think about like temperature control. So we're
Oh,
talking,
that's another good one.
you have to age it for a certain amount of time. You got to age
Mm-hmm.
it for 2 years. So what happens in Kentucky? You get all 4 seasons.
But
So
it's pretty moderate.
yeah,
It's not like it's super volatile up north where we're at.
Yeah.
Or
And
even
they're-
down south. And
Yeah, not too
So-
much humidity down there.
yeah.
right. But every season that changes, when you think of a liquid sitting inside a barrel, what happens when things get hot?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to expand.
Yeah.
What happens when it contracts or when it gets cold? It's going to contract, right?
Yeah.
So you think of this whiskey or this, not yet whiskey, but this alcohol that's sitting in a barrel aging. As it gets hotter, it's going to expand and it's actually going to go into the barrel. Like it's actually going to seep into the barrel through that
Deeper.
charred. Yeah.
Because the oak has expanded because it's hot.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's
the
so
spores
it's,
get bigger.
so it's constantly going in and out of these barrels, pulling those flavors from the oak itself,
Yeah.
and from that char that they gave it. So that's a big part of it. Is just the region that it's in. You get a very good, consistent year after year humidity change, seasonal change, temperature change, all that kind of stuff. And I think that's a big part of why Kentucky has become such a popular place to manufacture bourbon.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of cool. So let's just take this is going to be a quicker episode today, but I want to go through the label
Okay.
on this bottle here. So Bill, do you want to take us through this Four Roses label so we can kind of talk about each of the terms on here?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing when you walk in there, you see names, obviously different distilleries.
Right.
So I mean, this is Four Roses,
Okay.
and then obviously different distilleries provide different, I guess, products.
Mm-hmm.
This is a single barrel strength.
Okay.
So the liquid inside this bottle comes from one barrel that was aged, and the same liquid was in there for, let's see, this one was aged 9 years and 8 months. So
Okay.
this is from
So this was aged for 9 years, and when they took it out of the barrel, they didn't mix it with other ones.
they didn't
It
mix
was
with
just
anything.
like
It's a single barrel.
this barrel is going into these bottles. That's
So
it.
whatever it tastes like, we're not changing anything, and we're not adding anything to it. We're not mixing anything together. It's
And it's a one of a kind.
one of a kind.
You'll never have another one
That tastes exactly like
exactly
this.
the same.
No,
That's cool.
which is special with single barrels.
Right. Now,
And-
does this say bourbon on it?
It should somewhere.
Yeah, it says bourbon, Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey, distilled and aged by Four Roses Distillery in Kentucky. So it's telling you where it was distilled, and they're supposed to put where it's bottled. They generally you're
Might be in the small writing on the
yeah, I'm
bottom.
sure it's on here somewhere.
Backside.
But most places will put, yeah, it does say. Yeah. So it does say that it's bottled. Most bottles you'll be able to see that it was distilled here
Mm-hmm.
and it was bottled here. So what's interesting is not everybody has the resources of a place like Kentucky or the space to actually distill their own whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
They can't let it, do its, they can't actually make the whiskey. Now
Right.
they can age it. So a big thing is for companies to actually source their whiskey.
Yeah.
So they're bringing in that raw, what we see on the table here, this clear liquid.
Mm-hmm.
So they can bring this in.
Yeah, a big one you'll see is distilled in Indiana.
Oh yeah.
That's a big one.
Oh,
Yeah. So there's a big distiller out in Indiana.
like a white label packaging type of thing. Distill it and then send it to.
They still different mash bills, and then people will buy that distillate and age it however
Yeah.
they want to.
Yeah. So they can buy it from this source and bring it wherever they are and age it for maybe, a unique flavor profile.
One example is
Something like that.
Smoke Wagon.
Smoke Wagon.
Distilled in Indiana,
Mhm.
aged in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Aged
Which
and bottled in Las Vegas.
Correct.
So they just take a large quantity tanker truck
Mm-hmm.
of distillate, ship to Vegas.
Is that the proper term?
Yeah.
I'm just pulling it from what Bill had mentioned.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure distillate is a proper term.
That's
Distilled liquid.
That's way too sciencey for me. I'm
I
going to go
know.
with clear alcohol. Let's just dumb it down for me if you guys don't mind.
No worries.
You
So
got
you,
it,
you
Corey.
take this clear alcohol and you're able to get it to Vegas, and they take that off the truck and they'll start to put it into barrels, and that's where they're going to age it in the Las Vegas foothills
Yeah.
of the
And different flavoring
Nevada
because you're experiencing
Right.
Vegas winters and
Smoke
summers.
Wagon
and-
has always escaped me. I thought that was a really cool brand.
Never tried it.
Looking forward to it someday. But they've got a cool unfiltered uncut.
they do have an uncut unfiltered as well.
It'd be a barrel proof, or is it a cask?
That would be.
I know
there's different terms, but I
Right.
think they call it barrel proof as well.
Barrel proof, cask strength.
Barrel strength.
Pretty much the same thing.
Pretty much it's
synonymous.
coming.
proof.
It's coming straight out of the barrel. They're not adding any more liquids to dilute it down
Mhm.
to make that ABV, that proof.
Will they dilute it
lower.
with that limestone water?
They
or is
could.
it
Yeah.
is that to try and get a certain proof?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yep.
Consistent product.
Mhm.
A
correct.
little bit more palatable
Correct.
for those who aren't as appreciative
Yeah,
of the
Adam.
I'm not proud of it, but I'm
no.
still I'm
Hey.
working a little bit slower here.
You'll get there. You'll get there
Eventually.
So what's cool? I'm looking at this bottle right now. 56% ABV alcohol.
And the proof, how do you get that?
Double it.
Just double it.
You just times two, and that's your proof.
It's the math.
Why
the
they have
math
to
they
put
decided
both?
to use.
Yeah, why they have to put both on there? I don't know. Why not? What's the purpose of having both?
I think for the
I think
per volume, isn't it?
Well, no, just have the ABV and proof, just so people don't have to do the math themselves.
Yeah, but why even bother with the quote unquote proof? Why not just put out ABV on there,
Maybe
alcohol
they
per
have
volume?
more label room that they want to
Isn't
take
it
up.
because you have to have a per unit consistency across alcoholic products? Because beer, there's not like a proof, but you have a percent ABV.
I don't know. You're asking the wrong person.
Some products only show ABV, or some products only show proof. So some people put both.
All right. Well, I mean, I don't see anything other than, so this gives you the warehouse number,
Warehouse number,
barrel number.
barrel number, the level it was aged on. But that's a Four Roses thing too.
And that's in order to understand what you might like from them
Yeah.
currently, and then how it will play in the future.
Yeah, because they Four Roses, they're single barrels. They provide you with their runs and the tier in which they were aged on. In their warehouse, they go up to 6 tiers, so you know what level it was aged on, and the higher it is, generally
Right.
the higher ABV it ends up,
Oh.
just because of different weathering and humidity styles
Yeah.
in the warehouses.
Okay. So, hey, there's a little bit about whiskey. Like I said, today's going to be a quick episode, just kind of an introduction, introducing those of you who are learning maybe about some of these terms. And I think the biggest thing is to understand all the types of whiskey. Bourbon is a type of whiskey. Scotch is a type of whiskey. Rye is a type of whiskey. Like there's a lot of different types of vehicles that fit into that vehicle category, right?
Right.
And from now on, we're going to go over the label of every bottle. Sorry, my phone's ringing. We're going to go over the label of every bottle that we try from here on out, because I think it's important to learn. And once you start to pick up on, maybe you're watching and you go, oh, that's kind of a cool whiskey. They all seem to like it, which, by the way, I love this. I do not like a lot of Four Roses stuff. Sorry, but this is really good.
No, this is one of my favorite recipes.
I will
Absolutely.
openly share. I initially, when I first tried it, it was not this nice type of bottle of Four Roses. Whatever was the off the shelf, very easily available, and I was not a big fan. To echo your point, I am a big fan of this. It's even at 112 proof, it's a fairly easy.
We'll dive into more Four Roses recipes as we go on.
And now this being a single barrel, I'm likely never going to have a bottle that will taste like this ever again.
No, absolutely not.
Maybe something similar, but
it won't.
I will never have a bottle. I can't go out and buy a bottle of this unless for some reason I can find it, because it is a single barrel. It came from one barrel that they aged for. How long did you say?
9 years and 8 months.
9 years and 8 months. They aged it. They didn't add anything to it. Took it right out of the barrel. Boom. There's your product. And that's an Ohio exclusive kind of thing. I'm sure every state,
private stores.
Yeah, private stores, they have
Private
their own
groups.
Yeah.
Will do.
Because there are
bottles.
groups that will actually go down to Kentucky to some of these distilleries and say, they'll try a barrel and go, ooh, that's great. We love that. That is our barrel. And they'll buy that barrel.
I'm looking forward to when we are able to do that.
Oh, yeah. I want to so bad.
That's in my 10-year plan. I don't know about you guys.
I agree. I would love for us to buy a barrel of something and have our own exclusive barrel pick.
That'd be great.
So when you see barrel pick, that means somebody went down there, tried that. Somebody who knows what they're doing, most likely, and said, this is good. We want this barrel and this barrel only.
I have a little surprise for you guys in one of the upcoming. I'm a part of a bourbon club.
Okay.
Interesting.
And they have actually hand selected a specific bourbon private stock from Bullet Distillery.
Interesting.
I'm not sure when I will have it in. I've got to get it shipped.
Okay.
But just made the purchase yesterday and very excited to share with you guys.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, we're going to cut it off there. Like I said, this is going to be a super quick episode today. And we're trying to shorten these things up a little bit because we've been told we don't care about you. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, we realize everybody's busy.
Yeah, no,
not everybody has.
We don't care about Adam. I think.
Yeah, I know. I'm the orphan child.
I mean, not everybody has the time to sit there and listen to a 50-minute podcast. So
no, absolutely not.
Let's try and keep these a little bit quicker. We do have some really cool things coming. I know we've promised Morgan, my wife, to come on the show soon and talk about some things.
She's a very busy lady.
She's very busy.
She's growing a human.
She's still been working. She's still been working out. She's been doing great, and I'm so happy for that. But I'm so happy for her to come on the next episode, and really we're going to dive into appointments. We have our 20-week anatomy scan coming up, and I want to talk about what can people out there expect from every appointment moving forward, because you have so many different appointments, and I had no clue what to expect going into any of them. I don't know what to expect this upcoming Friday.
Okay.
Other than I know if we wanted to find out if it was a boy or girl, we'd be able to find out. That's the only thing I know. And the only reason I know that is because I know we have to tell the doctor right when we walk in the room, hey, we don't want to know the gender.
Right.
Which I do, but I also don't. I do, but I don't. Like I see
you
both.
You committed to this.
I committed to it, and I see both sides of it. It's going to be super exciting.
Yeah.
So we're going to dig into that next episode. I got to get Morgan. She's a little nervous to come on to a podcast, YouTube video, but I told her nobody cares. Nobody's actually listening to us, which I hope turns around, because we've actually gotten a couple messages on our Instagram page and stuff like that. So that's kind of cool. Continue reaching out to us. We love hearing from people out there who are learning or whatever. So, at that end of things, we're gonna cut it off here. Thanks so much for listening. We appreciate it. Again, follow us on Bottles and Bottles Instagram, which is bottles.n.bottles. And then find us on YouTube. We'll have the links in the description, which I still need to put up there because I haven't done that yet. Whoopsies.
That's all right, Corb.
And look forward to the next episode. And as always, bottles up.
Cheers.